Good evening. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm the Texas Deaconess, and we're going to do another lesson on women of the Bible. Tonight we're going to talk about Esther. You know, Esther is only one of two books named after women in the New Testament, the other, of course, being Ruth. The setting for the book of Esther is in Persia, which is now called Iran. And Esther becomes the first notable woman in the Bible who lives outside of Palestine. She is the central figure in what was one of the most controversial books of the Old Testament, because not once does the name of God appear in it. But its significance and importance to Jewish history stems from the fact that it has become a symbol to a persecuted people of the ultimate triumph of truth and justice. And the courage of Esther becomes the dominating factor in the salvation of her people. Most authorities agree that the purpose of the book of Esther is to explain and to justify the Feast of Purim, observed in March by the Jews. Though the author of the book of Esther is not known, historians confirm that the fact he showed an amazing, accurate knowledge of Persian palace and customs let him know that the characters are skillfully presented, just like Esther herself. Like many characters in history, Esther makes her first appearance as a very humble figure. She was an orphan Jewish child. But 4 years later, she rises to the position of queen and has amazing power, and she manages to use that power wisely. The ancient writers' estimate of Esther's importance to the story becomes apparent, for in this short book, her name appears 55 times. The name of no other woman in the Bible is recorded so often. The queen who preceded Esther was Vashti, a respected woman of nobility and honor, and one who had the courage to refuse an unjust command from her husband. After much feasting and drinking, he had commanded eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before him, that he might show her beauty to the people he was entertaining. Now, historians believe that, reading between the lines, he may have wanted her to appear nude, but the Bible does not actually say that. When she refused, the king became so mad that he issued an order that her position to be given to another. By that refusal, this made way for the coming of Esther, who had been raised by her cousin Mordecai, a Benjamite official at the palace gate. Now, by saying he's a Benjamite, that means he's from the tribe of Benjamin. He had seen the king's royal notice that beautiful young virgins would be assembled for the king's harem, and that the maiden who pleased the king would take the place of Vashti. So it was that Mordecai sent his cousin Esther. When she was presented to the king, he loved her above all the women who had been brought before him, and he set the royal crown upon her head. After she became queen, her name was changed. Her Jewish name was Hadassah, which means myrtle, and they changed her name to Esther, meaning star. When Esther became queen, King Ahasuerus had no idea that she was a Jew. He had been attracted to her because of her surpassing loveliness, and he celebrated her entrance into the court with a great feast, which introduced her as queen of one of the most powerful empires in the world. Queen Esther soon gained favor with the people when she showed that she had sound judgment, self-control, and the ability to think of others. It was not long before she learned that Haman, her husband's favorite, Now, when it says favorite, he was captain of his guards and had a lot of power. He was like second in command. Haman had been described by modern Jewish writers as a Hitler, having so intense a hatred for Jewish people that he became intent on destroying them. When her maids brought her word of a serious feud between her cousin Mordecai and Haman, Esther was distressed. She knew she must act promptly and wisely. She soon received a message from her cousin, placing upon her the great responsibility. Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Challenging words for a young, inexperienced queen. Now that's Esther 4:14, that quote. Quietly she issued orders that all Jews hold a fast in her behalf, and she joined them in the fast, which in itself suggested that she had a strong belief in prayer. Following the fast, she prepared to go before her husband and intercede for her people. If the king was in a good mood, she might gain her point. If not, she could lose her cause, and she might also lose her life. As Esther made ready to appear before the king, one of the most courageous assertions made by a woman of the Bible is credited to her. So I will go unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. Esther was willing to die to save her people. Also, she had exhibited real loyalty in cooperation with her cousin Mordecai, who had raised her and was largely responsible for the fact that she now sat on the throne of Persia. As she appeared before the king in her most royal apparel, his first tender words to her were, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given thee to half the kingdom. She answered him, saying she had only one request, and that was that he join Haman and her for dinner. The king ordered that Haman be brought quickly. Haman was elated because he was sure he was now in good graces of the queen as well as the king. It would be easy to do away with his enemy Mordecai. He rushed home and bragged to his wife and friends about the invitation of the queen. They told him that now was the time for him to protest against Mordecai. Why not prepare a gallows on which to hang him? The next morning, Haman was waiting in the court for an audience with the king, and his mission was to request the king to hang Mordecai. But a surprise was waiting him. He learned that the king desired to pay honor to Mordecai. At a second banquet to which Haman had been invited, Esther was again asked by her husband what he could do for her, and she fell at his feet with tears in her eyes. We are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. Then turning to him, she said, The adversary and enemy is the wicked Haman. And at that moment he was in the banquet room as a guest, but he now humbled himself before Esther, begging for his life. But it was too late. The king was indignant. He ordered that Haman be hanged on the gallows. After that, Esther won even greater confidence from the king. He held out to her the golden scepter, again asking for the permanent protection of her people. She was instrumental in having it written into the law that Jews not only could defend themselves, but could slay their enemies. The Jews, then in Persia, celebrated their deliverance from the massacre that had been planned, and they called the celebration a Purim festival. To this day, Purim festival is celebrated on the 14th and 15th of March, when the book of Esther is read in Jewish synagogues all over the world. Queen Esther's last decree was that the feast be held annually, and it was written in the book. It became a law that stands even today. Esther herself lives in the heart of her people and is still commemorated at the Purim festival as a woman who rose up as a savior of the Jews who were refugees in Persia about 24 centuries ago. For a time such as this, remember that's Esther 4:14. Esther was put in her position by God to carry out his plan. What does God have planned for you? What does he have in store for your life? Many other examples in the Bible show that people are placed by God to carry out his work. What is God's plan for your life? You know, like Esther, you need to be prepared. We do not know when God will choose to use us. Be ready. Remember, for a time such as this. May God continue to bless and forgive the United States of America. May God continue to bless the Republic of Texas, and may God continue to bless you and yours.